So was Jeshua an Essene and a vegetarian? Let's talk about the truth behind this New Age myth. Hey guys, it's John sitting here in my studio. It's early in the morning. I've already finished my mug of coffee. It's 7 a.m. right now. My cup of coffee, I woke up at 6 this morning. My cup of coffee was the first thing that went down my gullet. Right now, I have a giant mug of water right here. I wanted to hop on because this morning I woke up and I was thinking about something that I announced yesterday about no longer being a part of the Aaron Abke event. And I wanted to kind of really state my view on this ideology of Jeshua being an Essene and Jeshua being a vegetarian, because none of it is historically accurate. And when I did my intake interview with Aaron's co-host, I told him right up front that I don't believe he was a vegetarian, and I explained where the only writings that say he were came out of the Theosophical Society and Theosophical ideas of Reverend Owsley, who was the author of the Gospel of the Holy 12, which was a series of newspaper articles, and Edmund G. Kelly, who wrote the Essene Gospel of Peace. Neither one of them ever backed up their writings with the source. They never actually showed any document that proved what they were saying. But this idea of Jeshua being an Essene or being a vegetarian is something that's out there in the ethos. People talk about this all the time. Dolores Cannon talked about these ideas. And what's so interesting is that, the only documented evidence we have of potentially the Essenes, the only documented writings we have that are potentially attributed to the Essenes, and I'm saying potentially on purpose because the writings don't say they're Essene writings. They're copies of the Torah, and the only documented version that they're possibly are attributed to the Essenes are the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are, as I said, they are copies of the Torah. They do not mention Jeshua or Jesus or any of that thing. They do talk about a potential Messiah coming, but they never name anybody by name. They never mention Jeshua once. They also, and here's the fascinating thing, they also never promote vegetarianism. There's nothing about vegetarianism. There's nothing about mystical arts in them. They are literally just texts from the Torah. And these ideas that Jeshua was an Essene, that Jeshua was in a mystical school and came up and his mother was trained in the mystical school of the Essenes to bring the Messiah forward. The biggest problem with this whole concept is that Jeshua didn't believe he was a Messiah, nor did he believe in Messiahs. If you just look at the texts that are attributed to him, which, once again, everything in the Bible is hearsay, but the texts that are attributed to him all say the kingdom of heaven is within you. Never says he's the Messiah once. He consistently says he's the Son of Man in the Bible, right? So he's not telling you that he is the Messiah. He's not telling you that he is some mystical teacher. He's literally saying that he found something within himself and for you to take heart because he overcame the world and so can you. These ideas of the Essenes being this mystical group come out of the Theosophical Society and a man in the 1930s who flat out made it up. So let's unravel how this all got started, okay? Why are so many New Age teachers repeating this claim? Was he really an Essene? Was he really a vegetarian? What the historical sources say is that the Dead Sea Scrolls, the only texts that have been potentially attributed to the Essenes, because as I said, they don't say they're Essenes, but it's being promoted as they are, and many scholars believe they may have been Essenes. But what are the Essenes? The Essenes are a Judaic sect, just like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So they are literally just a Judaic sect, and they never mention Jesus because they never had a Messiah show up. Classical writers like Josephus and Philo and Pliny, they describe Essene communal life as celibacy, purity, strict laws, but no connection to Jeshua. The Gospels say that Jeshua ate fish and lamb, the Passover meal, attended meals. He criticized overly rigid law. He said, woe to you, keepers of the law, teachers of the law. And in the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, which a lot of New Age people lean into, he literally says that it's not what goes in your mouth that defiles you, but what comes out. The idea that vegetarianism doesn't come into the story of this Essene mystical group until Madame Blavatsky in the late 1800s created the Theosophical Society, where she was trying to marry Hinduism into Christianity to try to make it a broader perspective and more accepting. Until that point, Jeshua was never linked with the Essenes, and there's no documented evidence of any Essene writings other than the Dead Sea Scrolls. So in my intake meeting, I very specifically had said that the Gospel of Thomas said it doesn't matter what goes in your mouth, what comes out is what's important. I explained Reverend Ousley's Gospel of the Holy 12, and I explained Edmund Jackelly's Essene Gospel of Peace and the origins of those, and how both of those never had any proof that the documents that they were supposedly quoting even existed. Everyone else in the world says they don't exist. Jackelly claimed he found the Gospel of Peace in the Vatican Library and another library, but both of those libraries say it doesn't exist. But it was fascinating how Jackelly's and Ousley's writings matched Theosophical Society teachings of the time, and then tied that into the life of Jeshua and tried to make that part of the process. So the myth began with the Theosophical Society when she promoted a universal wisdom tradition and recast Jeshua as part of a secret mystical brotherhood. 1800s to the early 1900s, vegetarianism was a trend. People were trying to say that this is what they taught in the past. Spiritualists and health reformers wanted their heroes to reflect their ideals. So they started saying that Jeshua was a vegetarian. There's no evidence anywhere. One of the things that really kind of stood out to me in my intake process for that event was after I had told them about the origins of these two documents, I was told flat out, well, we get this from the other Essene writings. Well, there are no other Essene writings. There's only the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Dead Sea Scrolls don't mention vegetarianism, and they don't mention Jeshua. So the idea that they're getting these ideas from other Essene writings, the only Essene writings that claim the things that they're claiming are the Gospel of the Holy 12 and the Essene Gospel of Peace, neither of which is a documented historical thing, and both of them have been exposed as frauds a long time ago. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Coffee Time with John. This channel runs off coffee, so get your coffee and tea at johnsjoe.com. This concept that the Essenes were a healing sect, they conflate this with another group known as the Therapeutai, or that's the Greek word for healers. But they were two separate groups. There was the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, and the Therapeutai was something entirely different. But this idea that Jesus was an Essene healer takes root not in history, but in these philosophy clubs and theosophical clubs. The big push of Jackelly's Essene Gospel of Peace in the 1930s has recently had a new life born into it by Greg Braden and now Aaron Abke and many other of these New Age teachers who are leaning into these theosophical teachings that have no basis in history. Jackelly claimed that he discovered this Aramaic manuscript, but has never produced it. He never produced it. He never showed it to anybody. He never took pictures of it. He never even did sketches of it. He just claimed that he found these things, but the places where he claimed he found it, both say it doesn't exist. So for this story, this New Age ideology of him being an Essene and a vegetarian, you have to believe in ancient conspiracy theories, which is something people sell. They talk about this ancient, he was a vegetarian, he was an Essene, and the Vatican is hiding it. He wasn't an Essene, and he wasn't a vegetarian. He says, before Abraham was, I am. That's a quote from the Bible. Well, Abraham was a direct representation of the Judaic faith. For him to say, before Abraham was, I am, was saying, I do not subscribe to the teachings of Judaism. That's exactly what that quote means. And in his ideology, an Essene being a Judaic sect who was promoting Judaism, he would never have done that because he himself was anti-religion. He was anti-dogma. And what happens is the New Age ideologies of the Theosophical Society have created new dogma. And one of those dogmas is the diet of vegetarianism. They're saying you have to be vegetarian to rise to the next level of whatever this is. Jeshua always spoke of being here today, loving in the now. I leave you one commandment, love one another. He didn't say, I leave you one commandment, love one another, and be a vegetarian. Never said that. Not once do you see that anywhere in any text anywhere, except for in the ideas and the concepts of the Theosophical Society of the early 1900s, and now being re-promoted as truth by people who are making a very good living off of it. No scholar has ever seen those manuscripts. No scholar has ever had, Jekeli never had his work peer-reviewed because there was no way to peer-review something that didn't exist. Back in those days, Edmund Jekeli was one of the first New Age gurus who sold books like crazy. He created a counterculture aligning Jeshua with these New Age ideas of the Theosophical Society. And here's another thing that's interesting. The term New Age comes out of the Theosophical Society. They invented the term. Today's teachers still repeat it, and it feels good but it isn't historical. So why does it still persist? People want a Jeshua who matches their modern values, their modern ideas of compassion, peace, and nonviolence, and holistic health. But they're not looking at it from the perspective that all of these ideas that they're promoting are something outside of yourself that you have to do to create this within yourself. Jeshua's way was love, nothing more. There was no dogma you had to fulfill to walk the way of Jeshua. The way, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He just lived who he was, unapologetically. But the myth works, and it still resonates emotionally, but it's a projection from something that is not in any way, shape, or form historical. When they told me that they got their information from different Essene writings than I had just debunked for them, I knew full well that my time with them was done, because he literally told me that there were other Essene writings that do not exist. There are no other Essene writings. The historical Jeshua was radical enough. He didn't need a mystical secret society to validate him. He was present, loving, empowering. He had no dietary laws. What diet should we follow? It's not what goes in your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out that defiles you. What comes out is your words, your thoughts, your beliefs, your ideas, which are reflected back to you in the image of God. This concept of creating new ideas of dogma and doctrine that are based in theosophical teachings that are proven to be actual fraud is dangerous to the world, because you're literally telling people that this is what Jeshua taught, but it's not what he taught. He did not teach vegetarianism. He did not teach dogmas of diet. He did not teach dogmas of mystical sex and there is no ancient conspiracy theories to what he taught. He taught to be loving in the now. That is the way. And someone's promoting the idea of the way being that their way is Jeshua's way. If they're saying anything other than being love in the present moment, then they are adding to something that is not spoken of in history. And the idea of Jeshua being mentioned in Essene writings, there's no evidence of it. None. The idea that he was a vegetarian, there is no documented evidence of it. None. This all comes from the Theosophical Society, from Jekeli and Owsley, not from history. But the real Jeshua taught love and the kingdom within, not dietary dogma. If Jeshua was an Essene vegetarian, someone forgot to tell the fishermen he hung out with, because they were all eating fish, they were all eating lamb, they were all having all this beautiful stuff. If you argue the fact that Jeshua was a Jewish man and he was following the laws of Judaism, which throughout the Bible, he says, woe to you, teachers of the law, and before Abraham was, I am. But if he was following Jewish tradition, the book of Leviticus literally does say what animals to eat. It's hard for these New Age guys to live into, because when you call out the facts, their story falls down, because it's not from historical evidence. It's from an ideology of New Age dogma created in the early 1900s. So the first thing I would say about this is I will always stand on my truth. I will always come back to the present moment love. Everything else is a dogma. And what the New Age teachers are teaching nowadays is not the way. It is literally something outside of yourself that you have to incorporate into your life to get to something. That's not what Jeshua taught. Be here, think not upon tomorrow, be here today. You're not seeking enlightenment, you become the enlightenment. And the enlightenment does not have a dogma. It's just love. It's just the energy of love. So I guess I want to encourage you guys to question spiritual claims and look into where they actually come from, because this idea that he was an Essene and a vegetarian does not come from history. It doesn't come from any of my regressions either. It comes from the Theosophical Society and what these people have read in Dolores Cannon's book, and it has no presence in truth. It has presence in ideologies that were being pushed upon society through the Theosophical Society. And I want you to understand that, as he said, it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out. So put your words, thoughts, and deeds behind love and live them in the present, and you are walking the way. You don't need anything else. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.